dear viewers, and welcome to VOV 64. Every 15 seconds, a worker dies due to a work-related disease. And every 15 seconds, at least 160 workers suffer from work-related diseases. Statistics have it that at least 6,300 people die each day because of work-related diseases or accidents. And in that light, we're meeting you today on another episode of VOV to delve on safety and health in the chemical use of in the use of chemicals at our different workplaces. We all know that we days to the International Day of Safety and Health, and we are delving on the themes set aside to commemorate this day. And here with us are experts in the field, and of course our journalists joining us from Akwaya after carrying out investigative journalism on the facts and figures that you should know. So at the end of this show, we all know what we must do as employees and employers on the other hand, so we respect safety and health measures in our different workplaces. I'm your host, Amy BANDA, and I'm thanking you for joining us on VOV 84. By my extreme left is Mr. Wale Bakari, joining us all the way from the UK, an executive director of the SMTS company, a trainer for a 2-week training ongoing in Cameroon, precisely in the economic capital, to talk on safety and health. And next to Mr. Bakari is Solomon Agborem, the voice from Akwaya, joining us to give us facts and figures on the subject matter. By my extreme right is Ahmed Hassan, an HSE advisor on one of the ships offshore, and he's going to be talking more about his experience related to work and in terms of safety and health in his place of work. And right besides Mr. Ahmed Hassan is Mr. Ngang Godwin, a mechanical engineer trained from the University of Lagos, joining us to share his experience. Good afternoon, sirs, and thanks for joining us in yet another edition of VOV.
Thank you.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
Oh, I just want to find out what we call safety. And is safety first or production first? I may want to start with you, Mr. Godwin.
No, safety first. It is clear. Safety first. If there's no safety, no work. That's the rule.
No
when
safety?
you breach these rules, then you're done with it. You have no production.
No safety, no work. Mr. Wale, are you confirming or rejecting?
Yes, definitely. What the maxim says is if it cannot be done safely, then it should not be done. Safety is an integral part of the work process, and as long as you've got to work, then you've got to do it safely. If it cannot be done in a safe manner, then it should not be done at all.
What do you call safety, Ahmed?
Either do it safely or never at all. Safety, I think it's not only at the workplace, it also extends to our life on the street, at home, everywhere. So I believe safety is first concern for everybody.
Safety first, production first, Solomon?
Well, certainly, safety is work on its own, and which means if you have to work, you must be safe where you work. And it cuts across the board. If you're taken to the north, you're taken to the south, safety must be first, because you cannot do effective and productive work if you are not safe in whichever environment you find yourself. So in as much as you try to make a lot of money, you must be safe wherever you do it and the way you go about doing it.
What about the machine going bad and you have to respect the deadline in terms of order because you must produce? But then you have to respect the safety and health measures in your industry. And we're talking about safety first. Do you stop the production or you look for secondary measures to ensure that you deliver on time or you respect safety?
The rule still applies. Whatever you want to do, you have to respect safety first. If your machines break down, well, of course, you have to repair them, you have to maintain them. But doing so, you have to respect safety rules. You don't have to breach safety rules because you are in a hurry, because you want to produce, of course. But the result at the long run is that you lose. You lose what you want to gain by disrespecting safety rules. So you first have to you first have to look at the safety side while you are maintaining or repairing your machines. You need to respect safety, and until the safety rules are well seated, are well organized, then you can go on production.
What does it take, Mr. Wale, to have safety at work?
If I could just say something to the issue of production and broken down machinery. the fact that your machines even break down in the first place could be indicative or could be an indication of a problem with your safety management system in the first place. You shouldn't suffer a breakdown of your work process if you are properly implementing your health and safety management system, a component of which is proper scheduled maintenance of your work equipment. You understand what I'm trying to say? There will be unplanned breakdowns due to one or two issues, but usually if you follow a properly implemented health and safety management system, then a scheduled maintenance regime should ensure that your machines do not break down in a way that will put you under production pressure such that you will be keen to abandon your safety procedures. Okay? Now, that said, no matter how much pressure you are under, you should not jettison your safety arrangements in order to meet production, because the consequences of your suffering an accident at work is going to be much more than what you will be losing by falling behind on your production schedule or your production arrangements. Okay? You're asking for
what does it take to have safety at work?
First and foremost, it has to be planned. It's not safety in the workplace. It's not something you do in an ad hoc manner or in a haphazard manner. It has to be planned. You have to have a system in place. Now, when we talk about a system, what are we talking about? A system does not necessarily have to be a very complex procedure. It does not have to be something that you will need an engineer or an expert to come and put in place for you. A system is being able to recognize that if you do something in one way, you will get a definite result if you do it the same way the next time. So once you are able to determine or identify the risks or the hazards in your production process or in your work processes, then the next thing to do is to put in place what we call control measures to mitigate or remove those hazards. All right? And once you have done that and you put in place what we call a safe system of work, then you should not suffer accidents. And so long as you do not deviate from that safe system of work, you should consistently have a safe place of work. Of course, there are so many things that it involves that it's going to be impossible for me to talk about in the 90 minutes or thereabouts we have here. But essentially, it involves planning, it involves foresight, and it involves doing the right thing at the right time. And most of all, it involves common sense.
Solomon Akbaram, would you say you have a well-planned system where you work to ensure that you are safe and healthy to produce more for an economic upclimb in your company?
Well, it depends on the environment, and I think each company, for it to be successful and productive and reach the market demand, must have all of these measures put in place. The absence of one creates a vacuum which plays on the productivity of the company. Well, for a media structure, you have a lot of things you need to do within deadlines. And if, for instance, the editing machine is not working, there is no way that you can have the report done on time. If the technician is not there, who is skilled and gifted in his own field, there is no way that you can have the report maybe given a technical touch. You can do the professional touch, but he needs to do the technical touch so that it goes freely, maybe on air or on radio, on TV, depending on whichever medium is being used. So all of these factors must be put in place. For the reason for which we are saying that in as much as these factors are there, we all must observe that it is being done in a safe and convenient environment. Where I listened to Mr. Wale talk, but it was much more of a technical and more professional. I think when we add help, we'll be able to strike a balance so that whoever is listening could be able to follow us and understand actually what we're trying to share on the panel.
Now, how different are the safety and health conditions in countries, economic sectors, and groups? Now, you've been in Cameroon for some time now, and you're from Egypt. Can you correlate? Can you tell us whether or not the safety and health conditions are respected in both countries in the same way?
Actually, there are the safety measures, and safety is being enforced by several organizations all over the world. And to establish any type of job or an industry, you must be certified by one of those agencies or maybe multiple agencies. And there are minimum standards and requirements for getting that approval. So whether you're opening a factory in Egypt or in Cameroon or any other country, you got to meet the minimum standards required by those agencies. Of course, those standards, it's not just one shot. They're being reviewed either internally or externally by those agencies or their representatives. From time to time, some of them are yearly, some are, every 5 years. But they have to ensure that those minimum standards are met.
At your place of work, I'm sure that these minimum standards are met, Mr. Ngang Godwin. It's important for me to know why chemicals are important in the workplace and beyond. And what do we call chemicals in the first place? Because I attended day one of Mr. Wallace's training, allows me to understand that the pen is a very useful instrument of work, but if not properly used, could cause damage, and huge damage.
Yeah. First, to what extent is safety respected in my own place of work? I would like to state here that it is true. We do put in place safety measures. We want to apply safety measures, all the rules that it takes to work in a safe and healthy environment, but we are never at 100% implementation. For various reasons, ranging from economic reasons, ranging from lack of training, ignorance, and so on and so forth. Because all these are important in applying safety properly. If you want to apply safety properly in the workplace, you have to get the guys sensitized and know what safety is, know what they have to do to in order to do things in a safe manner. What it takes to carry out things in work safely, tasks, and so on and so forth. So, despite the fact that we may have these as policies to respect safety rules, we may have plans, or the plans, usually implementation is limited for some reasons as I've stated. Okay, now, chemical substances. What's a chemical substance? A chemical substance is a substance that is derived from a chemical process, or that is used in industry for production. Those are chemical substances. And chemical substances happen to be at the origin of most of the occupational health problems that are faced in industry. You have such illnesses as, indeed, most of the illnesses have to do with your lungs, your respiratory system. For example, if you inhale, let's say, welding fumes, if you inhale paint vapors during painting procedures, and if you do this frequently and regularly, and you're not well protected, then you are going to catch one of these diseases, pulmonary diseases. That's why safety equipment, what we call in that jargon, PPE, personal protective equipment, are necessary when you are carrying out those jobs. Painting, you have to wear a mask, personal protective equipment. You have like a mask, you have even earplugs, and so on and so forth. You have the eyes, because the paint can go to your eyes, and so on. With welding, it is even more serious, because not only are you exposed to the risk of fumes, but to the risk of high intensity light, which can affect your eyes. So these are other aspects for which you have to protect yourself against. So to summarize myself, we do have safety measures in place. We do have plans that enable us to carry our works activities in a safe manner. But I must say that because of financial limitations, these safety precautions are not always done to 1% effective.
How much progress can be made, Mr. Wale, for the sound management of chemicals?
Well, thank you, Amy. Well, chemicals are substances that we cannot do away with in the production. As a matter of fact, we cannot do away with chemicals in life. Chemicals are useful in so many ways. In food production, we cannot have good food production without chemicals. For pesticides, which help in the farms, are chemicals. Without these pesticides, our farmers will suffer. All right. Even in the household, we have chemicals. We have detergents. We have anti-pest chemicals that we've got to use. In medicine, pharmacy, most of the medicines out there are chemicals. All right, and these chemicals are generated either as an end product, with the aim of it being an end product, which is what you finally see on the shelves, or it could be a byproduct or a processed material, that is used before you finally get to your end product. But what I'm trying to say is that chemicals are an integral part of life, whether it be for food processing, for household uses, or even for health well-being. We've got to have chemicals. And the problem, or what the ILO, which is celebrating the World Safety Day, is concerned about is the safe use of chemicals and the problems that could arise from the use of these chemicals in the workplace. And like Mr. Godwin has said, there are various problems that could arise health-wise. Of course, pulmonary problems are just one of them. But you've got cancer, which is very important, and cancers develop through exposure to these chemicals over time. We could have exposure to chemicals could have both what we call acute. I'll try to keep it as low as possible, like he said. Yeah. Acute refers to effects that you see almost immediately you are exposed to it. It could be just vomiting. Or it could be dermatitis, skin rashes that develop, And then you have chronic effects, which develop over a much longer period of time. The challenge is that a lot of times the chronic effects are not seen until long after exposure. So even being able to link the effect with the cause becomes a problem. Somebody's working, take an instance, like he said, in a welding environment, and there has been inhaling fumes for 15 years. Okay? The effect might not become immediately obvious. And then he retires and goes back home to his village. And about 3 years later, he starts developing lung problems. It is possible for him to think the problem is because he came to the village.
Or witchcraft.
Or witchcraft, all right? Well, whereas the truth of the matter is that it's a problem that arose from what he inhaled in the workplace through unsafe work conditions, okay? And then even when the organizations like Ahmed mentioned that have the standards try to monitor these chemicals, a lot of times they restrict their standardizations and how do I say it now? They restrict the monitoring of these chemicals to single chemicals. Okay, they are talking of methane, they are talking of chlorine, they are talking of different chemicals. But a lot of problems arise from a mixture which are not looked at in the process. And the combination of some of these chemicals are actually what cause problems. All right, but this is not. This has not been given enough study, and I think that is part of what the ILO is also doing. You know, trying to see how this can be overcome. But chemicals are very useful. Chemicals are very good. Chemicals we cannot do without, you know, because they form an integral part of our lives. But what we need to do is to see how we can work with these chemicals safely and use these chemicals safely.
I retain that the International Chemical Safety Card is not a guarantee that employees won't suffer from occupational diseases in the long run. Now, Solomon, I would like to find out from you how it's possible for us to evaluate these work-related diseases way ahead of time so we don't suffer when we retire.
Okay, work-related diseases. First of all, let me say this quickly. Mr. Wale mentioned of food production, and I think that for us to bring it within the local context where we can best understand ourselves, because the local community are also watching the show, and they need to find a space where they can understand what we're talking about. We are still at the level of expertise, and I'm not so very comfortable if the common man is understanding. A reason for which I want to bring this descriptive show or scenery of what we are trying to say. For instance, we are talking about safety and health. Just in case, how do we place the utensils in the kitchen? How do we place the glasses maybe in the sitting room? So these are some of the practical things which the common man can be able to situate and find his or herself. Do you want to put the wooden pot on top of another counter where it is above you, or you want to put the metallic pot on top of a counter which is above you? Where do you place the knives? Where do you place the forks and all of that? In the sitting room, where do you place the glasses? These are all safety measures which, if we understand them, we'll be able to avoid some home-based accidents which occur on a daily basis. When you're washing the plates, where do you put them? How do you handle them? And of course, we use chemicals in washing some of these things back at home. So we're able to, if we can elaborate on some of those aspects, like you should know that glasses should not be placed at a degree too higher than you, so that just in case you tip over, it does not fall on you, or even if it drops on the floor, you cannot step on it. So we are also looking at some of these things which can help us go ahead and place us within an environmental
I think
context.
I understand what you're saying.
Well, I'll come back to you, Mr. Wale, but let me finish with what Ami was trying to find out. Well, in the environment which I've been able to do some work with the rural community, safety and health is a matter of great concern, because most people get in contact with chemicals and they don't even know the composition of these chemicals. Now, some of them are very toxic. Some of them are even so hazardous in a way that just inhaling some of them can cause a very serious health complication. Now, I also want to say kudos to some of the First of Law and others who are watching how these chemicals also come into the country. I want to talk here particularly those of the gendarmerie. I think last year I was doing a report where a couple of these items, a consignment of them, about 25 cartons of toxic substances were apprehended by the Forces of Law and other. That was in Manfi. And the situation was unraveled because they were importing some of these things from the neighboring country and through the borders. So I think there should also be check on how we can monitor what comes to the country and where it is being used. Now, health, in health issues, we are talking here of a local community where they do not understand how to use some of these things. Now, I bring a practical example. For instance, in a recent report which I studied and I follow up and I tried to do some investigation, we used to have a lot of vegetables in the market, but immediately you purchase these vegetables, before you get home, you find out that the leaves have withered already. But in the yesteryear, we used to observe that when you purchase some of these vegetables, you even keep them a day, 2 or 3, and even a week, and it stays fresh in the house. So what is happening? And we begin to see the fact at which, the extent at which we use a lot of fertilizers on these vegetables. Not that the fertilizers are not good. The fact is, people who use these fertilizers do not know what quantity to apply at what given time or within a particular working area. Maybe you have 2 hectares of land, you have to farm on 500. Now, there is a quantity scientifically that you have to apply on this piece of land. But, you know, with the local tradition, most people want to think that why should the expert ask me to put just a cubic meter when I can put more than this so that my crop can be more healthy? And that is where we have the problem. I bring you the issue of what we have today, the tomatoes, which we eat every day. You go down to Douala, you will find them. You go down to Manfe, you will find them. You go down to whichever part of the country, you will find them. The degree and at which they are being produced is also a cause for concern. This calls for the fact that most of them are being produced with the use of chemicals. But we are worried because the local farmer still needs to be drilled and still needs training on what quantity to apply. You know, we are in a competitive market now. Everybody wants the tomato to grow fast so that they can sell. So within our context, I think if the local farmers begin to think that we can consult the experts to advise us on what to do, or what plantain seedlings can we use at this point in time, and at what extent can we apply the chemicals, it will help us to tackle the issue of safety and the use of chemicals, Ami.
Thanks so very much, Solomon Akbarim. I see the people of Manu clapping their hands that you've come right down to them so they can understand how they can implement safety and health policies when they are carrying out agricultural practices in our country. You can join us through an SMS by just sending us your message through the number 77104269. I guess you can put the number on the screen already in, or you call us through the number 73393946. Call us through 73393946, or you text us a message through the number 77104269. Before we take the first report of the day, Mr. Gang Godwin and fellow gentlemen on the platform, I'd like to find out from you, after listening to Solomon, it's important for us to know how safety and health in agriculture can be made possible.
Well, the important issue to make in making safety important in agriculture, I said most of it, is to ensure that the farmers are drilled, they are trained, so that they do not apply fertilizers and substances only because they have asked to apply them, but they should understand the effect of those fertilizers and chemicals on the plants. So that as they do apply the chemicals, they should know that they have to respect the prescriptions concerning those chemicals. I know in the villages, this may be a bit scientific for them to understand, but maybe one way is to assist them, particularly on the terrain, at the time of applying these chemicals and fertilizers in their farms.
Ahmed, there is a statement that you apply many times when you're talking about safety and health policies. You are reducing your risks to as low as reasonably practicable. What do you mean by that?
There are many measures or factors that affect you when you're assessing your risks or hazards, which is around you in the workplace. During your risk assessments, you gotta be, let's say it in a simple term, you gotta be logic. Let me give a simple example for everybody. For example, if you're having a glass on a table and you wanna take your control measures to make sure that this glass is not gonna fall off the table, you're not gonna build around it a building, for example, to control it. Your control measures might be not to put it at the very edge, to ensure that the floor that you put it on is not slippery, for example. So there are many factors that you put into consideration when you're assessing your risk. That makes it reasonable. Practicable, that also we can say the economic part affects that. For example, for a task with such amount of cost, to eliminate the hazard, you're not gonna, for example, dedicate a double amount of the outcome to make it done safely. So it's a kind of a balance between the type of the hazard and what are the control measures that you need to put in place to eliminate that hazard.
Would you have something to add to that?
Well, basically, you said it all. When you're talking about reasonably practicable, it has to make sense in terms of time, effort, and financial cost. All right? Mr. Godwin has said one of the major limitations of that he has faced in working safely in his company, for instance, is in terms of financial limitation. Okay, if the cost, like Abeda said, of tackling the risk or the hazard is so much out of proportion to what you are trying to prevent, then that will be not reasonably practicable. You know, the term itself, reasonable practicability or reasonably practicable, derives from a judgment some time ago. I won't want to go into that now, you know. But the important thing is that it is just saying that you should apply common sense. Okay, you should apply common sense. To use a household example, okay, you use kerosene to cook. All right. What are the measures you can use to control the risk of kerosene is colorless, it's like water, okay? You put kerosene in a bottle. How can you prevent or reduce the chances or risk of somebody coming and drinking the kerosene? Very simple. You put a label on it. It doesn't cost you anything. That is a reasonable, practicable solution. If it does not have to be a label that is written in alphabets for somebody that cannot read. The people in your household, they know that if they see a bottle with liquid in it with a red sticker, it means don't drink. It means it is kerosene. That is a control measure. And once you do not, which is where the system comes in now. Once you do not, today you say it's a red label, tomorrow you change it to a blue label, next tomorrow you change it to no label, that means you don't have a system. But if consistently and every time, red label, kerosene, don't drink, everybody knows. Nobody will go and drink it. All right, that is a reasonably practicable way of controlling that risk. But instead, you say, okay, kerosene, what do? I don't want anybody to drink it. I have to go and buy a container that will prevent people from drinking it. And you go to the shop and you have to buy 200,000 safer container for kerosene. That is not reasonably practicable. All right. So, like he said, it's a balance between time, cost, and effort. All right, and the risk or hazard you are trying to control.
Maybe to come in briefly, I mean, fortunately for us in Cameroon, we have kerosene in green color. Okay. So I think most people are very conscious of what kerosene is and what it's not. At first, it used to be colorless, and I think it created a lot of problems. And I think the ministry had to think over it and see to give it a color. But you know, when you add color, it gets to reduce in its effectiveness and all of that. But I think it was one of those practicable ways to differentiate on some of those substances. I think you also make another interesting point of labeling. You know, I mean, we're talking safety and chemicals here. We know most of the medicines produced are chemicals in their origin. Now, we know of where, of situations in homes where people don't even have a specific area where the medicines are kept. You know, at times, even little children have access to these places. And at times, a child who is not supposed to take maybe a painkiller goes and picks it up because it is found at an area where he or she can easily get there. And we know in the health system, the packaging is not good enough to differentiate that this is this kind of medication. We know the doctors will write what they want to write. At times you don't even get to see what it is. But where it is also kept is also important. And if we can come up with those labeling, you pick a package, this is penicillin, this is aspirin, this is quinine, I think it's going to help us to also control. And like we always see on the sachets and the packets, keep out of reach of children. But in our homes, we keep them where the children can easily get them.
And sometimes they are so curious, they don't care about the nefarious effects they may suffer from if they take those packets. Yesterday we were talking about that, the importance of identifying objects back at home, because the color of frill, the color of liquid detergent, or the color of groundnut oil, for example, they are similar. And if you do not identify them, you may just find yourself poisoning.
Groundnut oil has the color of diesel, diesel fuel. So you can easily mistake one for the other. That's why it's important to label it.
It's good for people to be educated, for people to be aware. You see, because a lot of times we take a lot of things for granted, and then when something happens, we start ascribing it to evil forces, and then you come to church or somewhere, you want to give a testimony, and just a lot of times those things, all they require is common sense. You see, I've been in a place where somebody got up and they say he wants to give testimony. They, instead of putting kerosene in the gas, in the stove, the housemaid put petrol. You see, and then it will have set the whole place on fire. And I'm thinking to myself, you are foolish. You know, that shouldn't have happened. There should be no way that kind of situation should have occurred if you have done your proper separation of chemicals. You do not keep some things in, like we have said now. You need to properly put things in the house, and especially in our homes. There are several things in the homes that we need to be aware of to help our safety. We need to have emergency plans even for the home. It's not only for the workplace. We need to have our own private emergency plans. If a fire occurs, what do our children know what to do if they are not? If you are not in the house? If one of the younger children is choking on something, does the bigger one know what to do? If the father is not around, or if the mother is not around. We need to come up with emergency plans. We need to come up with safety plans for the homes. You don't, even the women, you are cooking. As simple as knowing that the handle of your pan or of your pot should be turned away from your passage. It's a safety issue. All right. Once you put this in on the burner, you turn it away from you, so that absent-mindedly you don't walk and then knock it off and burn yourself. What kind of clothes do you wear when you are cooking or when you are frying? Do you wear boo-boo that the sleeves can get caught in the handle? You're laughing. You do that all the time.
No, I don't.
Those are simple things that will help you avoid unnecessary accidents.
Yeah.
Okay? And there are so many.
So many, of course. If you're just joining us, you're watching a live cast of VLV, and today we delve on safety and health in the use of chemicals. You must not be working in an industry to have direct contact with chemicals. Back at home, in the streets and the markets, you have direct contact with these chemical substances, and we must know how to apply them so we don't suffer from the nefarious effects. Right now, let's go and have this report on risk management, and we come back to see the importance of avoiding risk management. Or is it costly to practice safety and health rules, or rather manage risks? We'll be right back for more. A very safe working instrument like the pen could be a portable weapon from which a shot is discharged. Unsafe behavior, use of worn-out material, wrong use of palatable equipment, lack of knowledge, training competence, and safe system of work are incidents that could cause occupational accidents and diseases in any place of work. Confronted to these bitter realities provoked by emerging trends of occupational safety and health, these trainees upgrade their knowledge on health and life at work.
Actually, it's more knowledge and more specific information you're receiving, which makes it more clear to achieve a good work environment, safe, I would say, and to implement safety, not only in the work sites, but I think it's general in the person's life.
What if occupational safety and health was ignored?
If the environment is actually protected, you see, and the control measures put by the employee and the various international organizations like the ILO. And these measures are being followed by the employees. You see, the work environment is actually going to be safe to work and productive.
Statistics reveal that 1 in every 2 million unsafe acts around the globe results to a death. Pressing further, 85% of accidents can be prevented by the victim exposed to the hazard.
Health and safety training is integral to any work activity, and the benefits of managing safely the work processes is innumerable. You cannot even begin to calculate what it costs. You know, when accidents happen, statistics have shown that the actual cost of an accident in the workplace is just 1/8. The one you see is just 1/8 of your entire cost.
This serves as a reminder to employers and employees days to the International Labour Day that creating and sustaining a preventative safety and health culture only steps up performance in making decent work a reality.
Risk management is a problem, or maybe ensuring safety is very expensive, then you start by having an accident like we saw the gentleman in the report. Welcome back. If you're just joining us, we are talking safety and health in the use of chemicals in workplaces. It could be in the streets, it could be in the markets, such that we know what we must do as employees on one hand and as employers on the other hand to ensure that safety and health policies are properly implemented in our different workplaces. Here with us today are 4 gentlemen, all experts in your domains, trying to school you on your responsibilities and obligations, on the essence of using safety and health practices wherever you find yourself. You may just be driving and you're asked not to drink when you drive, but if you took 2 bottles before driving, then you're not ensuring that you are kept safe and you brought to your home on the safe measures. I would come to you, Ahmed, after that report to find out how safe or unsafe it is for you to be working offshore when you are sick and you're not given maybe a sick leave so you can treat yourself properly and become productive.
Actually, being sick in the offshore industry, there are measures that have been put by the organization. It's not specifically where I'm working at, but all the offshore industry. I'm talking generally. There are measures that have been set in place to control such situations, as having medical assistance, ensuring that there are first aid equipments, medications are available whenever we're having an illness case. Also transportation from offshore, which is done by either surfers, which makes it to the shore in a short time, or helicopters, which I could say every day, on a daily basis. It depends on the case, of course, of emergency. In conclusion, there are already measurements have been set in place to control such risk.
So we are still at the level of implementation. What are the responsibilities of workers and employers, Mr. Ngangodwin, in the implementation of safety and health center measures or control measures at work? I beg your pardon.
Yes. Let me reveal that very often managers tend to feel that safety measures or safety regards lower staff. Consequently, they do not give it the importance that it requires in terms of financial commitment, in terms of respect of rules and regulations, in terms of putting in place policies and plans and a follow-up that will enable safety procedures to be respected. So, what does it take for safety to be implemented? Management has to be committed to respecting safety rules and regulations. They have to be committed in putting in place training modules, sensitization modules. They have to put in place logistics like first aid centers hospitals, if possibly, dispensaries, or those in small sites, a first aider and a first aid box, which can very, very quickly attend to a case before going further in case the case becomes more serious. So management has to be committed. They have to put the logistics necessary in place. They have to be involved in managing safety issues. They have to also get, when they're putting down the safety, because the safety policies must be written and must be communicated to all the staff in the company, in the structure. And this safety, these policies, they need to do them, take into account the honorary workers' opinion, not just like you go and write something and come and throw it to the workers, say this is what the rules are. You have to get them involved and seek the opinion, get the involvement, so that when the measures are agreed upon, the workers will going to respect it. Now, how do you still further ensure that the measures are going to be implemented? You have to do what they call auditing. In other words, you have to audit the measures that have been put in place to see that they are being implemented. This auditing can be either internal auditing or external auditing. Most often, external auditing is better in the sense that when auditing is done internally, those in charge of auditing are either victims or either some of those who break the rules, or they are afraid to take decisions that might implicate their superiors. So the recourse to external auditing. And external auditing comes down to check the measures that have been put in place to guard against risk, against insecurity. They go into your files, they look at the records of accidents that have taken place, incidents, near misses, and see how they've been managed, how they've been treated, and concluded. They go into your operating procedures to see if the measures have put in place in how things that should be done are being respected. They go into your maintenance procedures and see if the measures put in place for maintenance procedures are being respected. So when they do this, they usually come out with a report which brings out issues that are not what they call non-conformances and non-compliance to safety rules, to procedures, and so on and so forth.
Well, I think in relation to what he's saying, the reports are always there, but what comes after these reports are published? And I think that is where the problem is. Now, I bring to you a practical example. I was following up an issue with one of an international company employing Cameroonians. And what I got from the field was so startling. They were employing over 1,200 Cameroonians, and none of them had a working contract or employment contract. Now, we talked about, like you watch in the report, somebody stumbling and falling in the company, and then maybe gets an injury. Now, the company cannot take care of him because it is not written. And even if it is written, to what extent do they go to implement what is on ground? So we are speaking for those who do not have somebody to talk, to speak for them. And I tell you, I've been in some of those companies and see for myself where people even go to work in rubber slippers. And when you look at the equipment around, you have heavy metals, you have heavy concrete blocks everywhere. Now, this is the danger that the employer puts the worker, because I should say some sort of leverage have been given them to do a business in the country. So I think the labor system in question, particularly in Cameroon, should look into some of this. Now, it is not only the individual who is an employee to walk up to the labor office and say, I have this. The labor office should also have a mechanism to visit some of these international organizations or even local companies and trying to find out from them what is happening. I think like Mr. Ngang said, but how often do our level officials go into the field? They only wait that, okay, write to us. And now the local man who does not even understand those procedures, just know that I'm managing here. They have just managed to employ me here. I just have to manage. No, I think Cameroon has come to a stage where we don't have to manage. But action must be taken. The employee must know that this is my right to have an employment contract. And in this employment contract, this is what is due me. And if it happens, I can take this action. But most often than not, they are not exposed to this information. And we have those who are on government paychecks or with taxpayers' money doing nothing in their offices. We need them to go into the field and visit some of these sites. Like if you're working for an international organization, you cannot move up to maybe the director or the country director and begin to tell him that this is the way I'm being treated. But if a labor officer comes there, he will be granted audience. And once that audience is granted, he will not only speak to them, but also goes on to talk to the workers. So I think this is where we find ourselves. They should have helmets. We have companies, a lot of construction is going around Cameroon. Visit the site, Mr. Wale, visit the site, Mr. Ahmed. You tell for yourself that even the local employees who are doing the odd job don't have helmets. They don't have good boots. I tell you, they go with plastic slippers on their feet. We have, lots of them have even lost their lives in some of these things. And that's why we're talking safety and health. And those who do not have the opportunity should know that the labor office is there. They should make contact. And the labor office should go down to the field, find out how these people are faring, and let them also benefit wherever they work as far as safety and health is concerned. I want to conclude briefly by saying, Ame, that I come back to agriculture because if we look at the economy of Cameroon, it has been sustained about 80% with agricultural activities. Now, in those days in primary schools, we used to have the nature study and environmental science. Today, we don't have them anymore. And there they used to teach us on how to use cow dung for local manure or to make compost manure back at home. Those are some of the things that we can easily do them freely and within our reach without exposing ourselves to some of the health hazards. I think when we visit some of these things, we have a lot of cattle around this country, and there's a lot of cow dung, which we can make our own manure and generate and produce those things we can eat with the best of ease, with our minds certain that we are living a healthy and good life while we try to do what we want to do, and how we can do them within the means available.
He is indeed the voice of the voiceless. Now I come to you, Mr. Wale, to find out what are the legal imperatives concerned if these are not respected. That means when these rights and responsibilities are not respected with caution, what should be done?
Well, looking at it from an international perspective, because I wouldn't want to go into the Cameroonian situation since I'm not familiar with the laws here. But from an international perspective, the International Labour Organization, the ILO, which is an agency of the United Nations, is responsible for labor affairs and labor matters all over the world. And there are countries that, what the ILO does is that it puts forward guidelines, conventions, rules, which are supposed to be followed by all signatory members. All right, and these conventions, for instance, if you look at the issue of safe workplaces, it is guided by Convention C155. Which is a International Labour Organization convention that mandates all employers to put in place a safe workplace for their employees. And part of what, if you go further down in that convention and in the guiding accompanying recommendation 164, which lists out the measures to be taken to guarantee the safe workplace, everything you have mentioned are included. Now, the issue there is this. Conventions are supposed to be ratified. They are obligatory, or they are mandatory by member nations, of which I believe Cameroon is one, to follow. Okay, I know that the United Nations operates here. I know that the International Labour Organization, the ILO, operates in this country.
That's right.
So naturally, the conventions and the recommendations of the ILO are supposed to be respected here. And not, whether there are local laws or not, the workers that are working, the employees in these organizations can rely on these conventions to make a case. Okay, but more importantly than just being, than these recommendations being there is the knowledge, the awareness of what is available to the employees. If you go to work in a place and that place is not made safe for you to work in, you should be able to make a case. That is where the trade unions are supposed to come in. It is mandatory under the ILO rules for safety representatives to be put in place. Mr. Godwin talked about policies. It is mandatory under ILO 2001 for you to have a written health and safety policy. Your written health and safety policy must identify the hazards in the workplace. It must identify who and who can be affected by your operations, whether the employer, whether the employees, whether visitors, whether neighbors, or even people that are not in any way concerned with your activities. But if your activities can affect them, then you must put in place control measures to be sure that they are safe. Okay? And all that is written out in the conventions and the regulations, which are supposed to be mandatorily followed in any country that is a signatory to the United Nations Charter. Now, Cameroon is one, and what that means essentially is that these rules and regulations have to be domesticated here in Cameroon. Okay, it is important that awareness be made by organizations like yours and programs like this. I'm very pleased to be here, and it is only through the efforts of people like you that the common man on the street will be aware that he actually has a right, and that if he follows up on this right, he can't actually get justice. There should be NGOs, non-governmental organizations, that he can approach to seek for help. All right? He can look for the ILO, the local ILO office here in Cameroon. I've got this issue at my workplace. What do I do? The ILO officer should have a database of NGOs, because the ILO is not going to get involved in your local politics. But they will have a database of the local NGOs that they can direct you to. They, okay, go see this person or go see this organization. They should be able to take up your case. And if there are no NGOs like that, then maybe it's time you may start thinking of something in that line.
Oh, welcome. If you're just joining us, it's a live cast of VOV, and we are trying to school ourselves on our rights, obligations, and responsibilities in our different places of work, on the streets and the markets, when it comes to implementing the safety and health policies around our environment. You were about to say something, Mr. Godwin?
Yes. What I want to say is that government actually has put in place some measures by which it checks out if the rules, the safety and health rules are being implemented. First of all, they proceed by what they call establishment classé. Maybe I can say in English, classified establishments. And there are three types of classified establishments. You have first class establishments. These are establishments that have a high risk of safety, of health, and pollution of the environment. You have, for example, depots. You have petrol stations. You have like breweries. You have like chemical industries, and so on and so forth. These ones are classified as first class. You have second class establishments which have less risk. Maybe like manufacturing industry, where you don't have a lot of too many processes taking place, or maybe like a big tailoring workshop and so forth and so forth. They have third class, which are like offices, like here. This is a third class establishment. Now, government has put in place an arsenal of measures involving laws, involving arrêtés, involving decisions, and all these decisions are expected to be applied by the classified establishments. And how do they ensure that the laws are being implemented. They have officials that go down to the field periodically to go and check to see if the rules are being respected, are being implemented. They go and look at, for example, are workers wearing the PPE? Are they wearing helmets? Are they wearing safety shoes? Are they wearing gloves? If they are filing, are they wearing eyeglasses? If they are doing this, do they have the appropriate equipment? They look at your record statistics of incidents. Do you keep them properly? And what measure do you take after an accident? Do you do a follow-up to remedy permanently that what went wrong, what was the origin of that accident, and so on and so forth. So these are some measures that the government has put in place, and companies are expected to respect these decisions. What happens most of the time is that big companies do respect these procedures. If I want to talk about big companies that can talk
multinationals,
of can talk of ADAX, can talk of Total, can talk of and so on, so Schlumberger, and so on and so forth.
Without putting me into commercial difficulties with my company, of course. Please.
So these companies actually, they do respect the rules, and they even go as far as, especially when they are big companies, they know that like processors. They're not processors because they are public government, they may not disrespect those. But big companies usually sometimes go as far as getting subcontractors to do this work for them, so that they are not directly involved. They want to concentrate on the production and what is their mission on the field. So they confide these works to contractors who are accredited in that domain and who can carry out the work for them. They operate as a shield between the company and government. And when governments have to come to site, they make sure that everything is properly organized. They make sure that the records are well kept. They make sure that the sites, all rules are being respected. Workers are wearing the helmets and so on. So well, not only when they come to field, they have to do this on a permanent basis because it is on contract basis. They themselves have to work out and implement their own programs for implementing these rules, so that when government officials come to visit the site, they should not find fault, they should not find non-compliances. Because when they do find non-compliances, there's a fine that falls to that company.
Okay.
So those are some of the...
Adding to this, actually, it's not to that limit. It gets to the extent for those organizations, when they're choosing a contractor or a subcontractor, they're ensuring perfectly that he's meeting their minimum standards. Otherwise, he will not be used. This makes the proper part of safety being implemented getting more confined on those who are following the rules and legislations.
Okay. We have this message coming from Linda, watching us from Village, a neighborhood in the economic metropolis of Cameroon. She says, hello, mother and voice of the voiceless, and to you, the panelists on the show. What advice can be given to people in the rural areas who use spray without protecting their eyes, nostrils, mouth, and also the quantity of fertilizer they apply on crops, especially 20-10-10?
Well, that's a specific quotation there in regards to the chemical used. Well, what I'm going to tell the viewer out there is that the local farmers should know that they are exposed to danger when they don't use the necessary gadgets which they have to use in going to the farms. I think Mr. Ngang earlier made mention of having a mask, having maybe gloves, and even the rain boots when you get into the cocoa farms, because you are not only protecting yourself from the chemicals, but you're also protecting yourself from insects and even harmful instruments which could be on the bed of the farm. So all of those things should be put in place. Like you have the spray, which you go out and spray. Most often than not, you spray the cocoa with your head raised, which means whatever goes up is likely to be inhaled into you. So if you don't have all of those things, what we are saying is the farmers, in as much as they make a lot of money from cocoa, they should also save some money to buy the equipment that will take them into the farms. The question is, can we have some of these things in the local shops? You go there, the storekeeper will tell you it is not in the market. It does not pass market in the local parlance here in Cameroon. And so they don't keep it in stock. So the farmer goes there and cannot find them, so he cannot use them. And then he puts herself or himself into deep trouble. So it's important for us to have them in the market.
I think it's also good that the farmers groupings, or the farmers association, I don't know. I know that there are groupings of farmers, both for selling and for looking at developments in their industry. The responsibility falls on these groupings to make their members aware of how to operate safely, of how to use chemicals that are made available to them. One thing that comes with every chemical is what we call in the industry the MSDS, the Material Safety Data Sheet. It comes with every chemical, and in it you have the ways it should be used. You have instructions for first aid. You have the way it should be stored. You have the way it should be transported. You have the composition of that chemical. You have what will happen if that chemical is left in the sun, for instance. You have if there's a spillage, what should be done is on that material safety data sheet. So if, for instance, this particular chemical that Linda has talked about, the 2010-10, is of wide application within the industry, then naturally you would expect the association of farmers to be able to say, okay, this is an issue. That is why we talk with all the professionals you have mentioned, risk assessment over and over. We have done our risk assessment and we have identified that 2010-10 is one of our major hazards, is one of the major implements we use. So what do we do to control the risk that come with using 2010-10? First and foremost, translate the MSDS into French, translate it into the local language. Get people to go around and teach these farmers one day. All it needs is just 1 hour.
Okay.
These are the issues.
Je suis Alex, je vous regarde depuis Njombe dans le Mongo. Là-bas, comme à Mbanga ou Penja, nous vivons avec le danger des avions qui pulvérisent les bananes avec les produits toxiques. Nos mairies ne font rien pour nous aider. Madame Banda, il faut rester toujours la voix de l'Afrique et surtout la voix des pagnes africaines. Putting the problem, exposing the problem where you have people spraying maybe some of these agricultural chemical produce without taking into consideration the health of the people living in that neighborhood. Yes, and he wants to know the kind of way they could ensure that they do not suffer from the nefarious effects, and how maybe the councils could be advised on how to make use of these chemicals without affecting the health of the people in that community.
Well, it still boils back to what we talked about, risk assessment. Who can be harmed? Who can be touched? Who is going to be affected by your activities? All right. Once we know that there's an environmental component, an environmental issue with the use of these chemicals, then steps need to be taken to make sure that they cannot be harmful to people around. And that is where the government especially comes into play here. What kind of chemicals are being allowed into the country?
That's right.
All right, what is the toxicity of these chemicals on the human body or on the human being? A chemical that is used to spray on a cocoa farm should have no way of impacting on people back in the village. All right, the toxic level of that chemical, even if it is carried by the wind to the village, should have dissipated enough not to have any harmful effect.
That's right.
So if the chemical is still affecting people in the homesteads, then there is something wrong with that chemical, and that is where the government should step in.
I think I want to come here on the environmental assessment impact. I know before any industry or corporation goes into effect, this must be done. And when the report was presented, what action was taken? Is it 50 kilometers away from urban settlement? And if within 50 years, urban settlement, how would the development become? Would people encroach and live closer to the plantation? So some of these things are already on the papers. But how do we implement them? It brings us to the fact that projects are conceived without looking at the future. Because we're talking about Njombe here, and if you're driving towards Bamenda, you're going through Douala, I think you come across Njombe. And it's talking about the planes spraying the bananas with whatever chemical, I do not know, and I don't want to get into that. But they are also raising now a concern because they are watching the program where you're talking about safety and health. Now, it is a serious problem, which the government, through its services, because they have the duty to go now into it. Let's look at this chemical, what is happening to it. Let's look at the population. Have they moved from the original plan of the implantation of this company? And if that has been done, what can be done to create that comfortable environment? Because the people must live.
To review the
environmental assessment plan. The people must live, and the company must continue, because it's an economic activity that keeps the people working there and also living, earning a living. So I think it calls for a review of that assessment impact, and then see how either to relocate the people, or why not engage an action so that the company maybe cede back part of the land to the people so they can live, because you cannot give preference to plan than to people.
But that's part of what we're talking about when we're talking about reasonable profitability. If you're looking at that kind of situation, then look at the chemical. There's no chemical right now that I know of that does not have a substitute.
Yeah, that's right.
Permit me to interrupt you. We have a caller, and probably they have a question for you. Hello, good afternoon, madam or sir. What's your name and where are you calling from?
Hello, good afternoon.
Thank you. What's your name? Where are you calling from?
I'm calling from Yaoundé.
Thanks for joining us all the way from the nation's political capital. You may ride on with your concern.
My name is Benongene Banua Ngalame.
Okay.
Yes, actually, I'm a desk officer / safety and health officer. I wish to first of all thank the crew on board for a marvelous work they are doing. The NTV crew on board for a marvelous work they are doing. If you look at the occupations in Cameroon, holding on the Okada occupation, if I may specify, these bike riders would ride ahead in town without helmets and without uniform. More to it, we go to the building occupation. These builders, although we define it in Cameroon as the informal sector, they go on without no safety shoes, have no helmet. And if we are talking about a Cameroon of the 2035, an emerging Cameroon, it is time for safety and health to have a good place in Cameroon. We shift this particular department, the safety and health department, just only to the maritime sector.
We're so sorry that your call was cut, and we hope that you can text us a message through the number 77104269. But we're coming back to the same issues of concern, and we're hoping that back at home, at the end of the show, you would have known what your rights, your responsibilities are in terms of safety and health practices at your workplaces, on the streets, and the markets, even in the church, just wherever you may find yourself. We had this message coming in before that call from the caller from Yaoundé. In Ongene, thanks so very much. Work safety is the most important factor of efficiency of labor, be it either physical or mental. Therefore, labor without safety tantamounts to less productivity. Thanks so very much. You did not sign it, but then I think it's very important what you were saying. Hi, the VOV crew and invitees. It's very important to add these 2 points to Mr. Wala, to what Mr. Wallace is Mr. Wale, not Mr. Wala. And we believe all professions, accountants, incidents are preventable if all safety procedures, both by the employees and the employers, are respected. It has to do with a mentality. In Cameroon, most safety, oh my God, this is not the number you are supposed to call. There is a number that you can call. That number is 73393946. It has to do with mentality. In Cameroon, most safety managers don't use their budget properly. Most PPEs are of poor qualities or inadapted, thereby poses a problem executing activities by employees. So they are forced to do without. Liberty Fi. Thanks so very much, Liberty Fi. We have the rules, we have the laws, we have the International Labour Organization and even the UN coming in to support, but we have a problem of implementation. Not because the employees don't want to implement this, but sometimes because the employees don't have the means to enable them implement. And on the other hand, because some of them are not aware. Hello, some other person is calling us. Hello, good afternoon. What's your name and what's your issue of concern?
Likely to carry on safety and health activities in Cameroon. I am a Cameroonian who appreciates safety and health, and I thank the United Nations and I thank US for coming out with such a program which is being looked upon in Cameroon as a theory. But it is time for it to take a full activity by us going to the field, not only a maritime officer, but taking it personally, based on the individual, criticize those occupations who are carrying the human life on a risky status, like the Okada guy.
Excuse me.
And even with some certain occupations where risk is a major domain. So I thank the crew on board for giving me this favor, and I wish you people the best and a nice day.
Thanks so very much for joining us. You can write to us through the email address abanda@stvgroup.com or amybandatv@gmail.com for more details on how to interact. And we want to say special thanks to you, Mr. Samuel Fuente and Mr. John Gwesa, for giving us the opportunity to delve on an issue days to the 120th edition of the International Labour Day celebration in Cameroon, such that we know that there are issues of concern we must addressed in order to have productivity in our companies. We have barely 7 minutes to go. Mr. Wale, we know you're in Cameroon because of a particular exercise that's been ongoing, and it would wrap up sometime Saturday or maybe Friday. Yeah. We want to find out from you the importance of such a training, and if the trainees come out of these exercise and they do not implement all these safety and health policies, would we have done anything at the end of the day?
Thank you, Amy. I'm here in the country, like you said, to carry out some training on behalf of Global Safety Training Solutions. And the point is that there is no way you can implement what you don't know. Like it says, what gets measured, all right, gets done. If you do not know what to do, then you can be forgiven for not doing it. Okay, what we are doing here is to empower people with the knowledge that is needed to operate safely. And this is what SMTS does across Africa and the rest of the world, actually. And what we do is to empower people with the required knowledge in several countries. And that is why we are here in Cameroon to do the same thing. And what we've been able to do so far is to bring the knowledge of safety systems, policies, concepts, principles out of the pages of the books and present it to the delegates and the candidates in a practical way, in a practical manner, and to provide them with the internationally recognized certification that they need to be able to work safely.
We'll come back to that. Rapidly, the last call of the day. What's your name, where are you calling us from, and what's your issue of concern? What's your name, where are you calling from, and what's your issue of concern? Do that rapidly in a few seconds, please. We're about to close up this edition of VOV. Right on. You may write on.
Oh, hello?
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 Right on.
Yes. Okay. Hello, Mr. Wale.
Hello.
Hello, Mr. Avril.
Thank you.
Hello, Mr. Hassan.
Hi.
Wow,
I'm very impressed with your intervention this afternoon. In fact, if there is no other person who enjoys the program, I think I enjoy it most. And I'm very impressed with your various interventions. In fact, I have a very serious concern, and I want to know whether there's any health hazard using the chalk. I'm a teacher, and every blessed day we use chalk, and I doubt whether there is any health hazard concerning that, because we inhale a lot of chalk as a teacher using chalk. In other institutions, they use borate, but we use chalk, and every 11 minutes we inhale chalk. I want to ask whether there is any health hazard, and if there is, what measures can we take to address it?
Thanks so very much for joining us. Any health hazards in the use of chalks?
Yeah, chalk is a chemical byproduct, right? And like in anything, there is always there's always a hazard to be considered. Not least of which is the fact that the chalk particles can be inhaled if it is not properly used. But more importantly, what we should consider is frequent washing of hands after using chalk. Okay. In between his classes, he should get his hands washed. They should make sure that while wiping the board, it doesn't inhale the dust that is giving off. You know, apart from that, there really isn't too much problem we encounter from contact with the chalk on his skin, because it's actually benign, what we call a benign chemical. Okay. There really shouldn't be too much of a problem with dermatitis, but at least once he avoids inhaling too frequently the chalk particles, I think he should be all right. And of course, he shouldn't ingest the chalk, which is why it's important, not just for him, but for everybody to wash our hands.
All right, 3 minutes to go rapidly. Let me get this one from Mr. Ngang. Linda is coming back to find out that in the rural areas where the use of gramazone to spray crops like Irish potatoes which is ready for harvesting to reduce the amount of grass in the farm, is it advisable to consume this kind of product, even concentrated acid spilled on your body, or it's spilled on your body? What do you need to do immediately before visiting a doctor?
Yeah, let me
rapidly in seconds, because
let me start with the second aspect. If acid spills on your body, the best solvent to get it off is water. Pour as much water on it as possible. That should solve the issue. Concerning the use of gamoline, did you say gamoline?
I saw gramazone.
Yeah, or whatever name, based on crops, on potatoes. Again, it comes to what Mr. Wale said about the MSDS. You need to know, because on the MSDS, they tell you what are the dangers in using that particular chemical, and they tell you what measures you have to use when you are applying that chemical, and again, what you need to do in case you are affected by that chemical. So that's what I can say. But you need to have knowledge about the chemical being used in order to further elaborate this point.
Thanks so very much. Ahmed, one last word before we part ways in this edition of VOV.
Actually, I'm here for work in Cameroon and also attending the course, which is Mr. Wali is giving me a lot of hard time. And it's regarding safety, of course. And I would like to say to everybody, thank you very much for giving me the chance to remind every single person to be safe and better safe than sorry.
Better safe than sorry. Solomon, one last word.
Briefly educate the community. They cannot prevent what they do not know or understand. Yeah. Of course, break it down to sensitization. Sensitization goes with demonstration. When they see, they believe that this is a hazard and they can stay away from it. Of course, monitor. When you monitor it, you'll be able to match it with the difficulties faced and how to adjust these difficulties. And the last thing, report the statistics. So that when we get the statistics or the community get the statistics, we can take action to stay safe and live healthy.
Thanks so very much. One last word from you, Mr. Wella, in a few seconds.
Very simply, I'd just like to tell employers out there who are still finding it difficult to spend money on safety, on training, on buying the proper safety equipment, that if they keep thinking that safety is expensive, they should wait until they have an accident.
Thanks so very much.
I'd like to say something.
Rapidly?
Yeah, very rapidly. I happen to be very concerned with transport and safety, road safety. One caller mentioned the fact that Benskineers are the most unsafe person on the road today. I want to give this advice, but particularly to Benskineers. Helmet, wear safe. Should have ceci, portez les chaussures de sécurité pendant que vous circulez. Si vous ne pouvez pas porter les chaussures de sécurité, portez au moins les chaussures qui vous couvrent les pieds. C'est au moins un minimum. Portez vos passagers, indiquez comment ils doivent monter, surtout les femmes. Il faut qu'ils montent avec les deux jambes d'un côté. Il faut qu'ils montent comme vous êtes monté. C'est plus sûr pour elles. Portez aussi les gilets de sécurité de la nuit. Ne circulez pas sans phare la nuit, s'il vous plaît.
Thanks so very much for coming, gentlemen. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for watching. Special greetings to you, Josiane Zima, who turns 1 year older today, 7th viewer of VOV. This is exceptional because it's a very important topic we're discussing today. We're glad to know that you forgot about your birthday party and you were watching others to implement the safety and health rules back at home. SafeWorks' goal is to place the health and safety of all workers on the agenda and to stimulate and support practical